Hello and welcome to Ditch Witch Diaries. We are back with our second poison in this series. Yay! And this time our lovely Raven is going to just take it away. Go right ahead, Raven.
Awesome. All right. So we are doing fly agaric or agaric. I've seen it pronounced both ways. I am going to refer to it as fly agaric.
Okay.
Um,
Wow, that is lovely.
I know this isn't even AI. This is like a real picture that I found from, it was like, there was a bunch of them. This was just the prettiest mushroom, so I used that one, but isn't that so
That's amazing.
beautiful?
I love it.
Oh, I love her. Okay. So, first of all, Amanita muscaria, my love. This is you know this already, but for people who don't know me personally, this is like my holy grail plant. Okay, this is my bucket list plant. I live, well, I mean, it's not really a plant, but I live in the Pacific Northwest and allegedly they're everywhere out here. I have not seen one yet. I have found a like a variety, which I'll talk about and I'll show you the picture. But I want to find the typical red cap, white spots.
Mhm.
It is on my bucket list of things to do before I die. I really, really want to find one. I'm not even going to pick it. I just want to find it. And I haven't seen it in the wild yet.
Yeah.
And yes, so buckle in because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. I'm in for it.
oh, I love her. Okay. So, um, the family is Amanita acai. All the vowels always throw me off. Amanitaceae. Mm. But the genus is Amanita. The species is Muscaria. So Amanita muscaria. Okay. So species identifiers. Let me move my little thing here. Go away. There we go. Okay. So the most typical is the cap. Okay. So the cap starts domed. So younger ones are very domed. And then as it ages, it flattens out. So you can tell a little bit about its age by how curved or flat the top is. Um, it usually measures 10 to 20 centimeters in diameter, which is like, what is that like?
Big.
10, no, like 7 inches, 7 to 10 inches, maybe
Yeah, that's what I
seven
said.
inches.
Yeah,
Yeah, something about that.
big. It's a big old
Um,
mushroom.
it's a big one, yeah. Should big baby. So the colors range from really deep scarlet red to a little bit more orange or yellowish, depending on the variation and the variety, which we'll talk about. But typically, it is this almost like fire truck red. It can be a little bit more orangey or a little bit darker, but it's the typical like fire truck red. Um, it also will have these warty spots, which is a remnant of the universal veil, which I'll talk about in just a second. Um, and so that's the number one identifier, the fire truck red, white spots. So the gills, which are like, the gills of the mushroom, are very closely packed together. You can see this here. And it's free from the stalk, which means that the gills don't really attach to the stalk. A lot of mushrooms, you'll see that the gills kind of come down like this, but our Amanita does not. She does not attach to this to the stalk. Another thing that I don't think that I say, but if you can also tell the age if you pluck her, which obviously poisonous, that's why we're including her in this thing. But if you pluck it and you kind of like cut it in half like this, the older it is, the more hollow the stalk. So you can tell its age that way too. So then we have the stalk and the stem. So it is white. Typically, it's pretty brittle. It breaks pretty easily. Oh, I do have it on here. It becomes more hollow with age. Now it has a skirt. This very distinctive skirt is another very easy identifiable aspect of our agaric. Agaric. There you go. Um, the skirt is called the annulus. So that's the annulus. Now, the base, which is called the vulva, we love that. The base is very bulbous. You can see this here. So if you don't break it off and if you can actually pluck it out, you will see that the base is always very bulbous. It looks very inflated. And it also has these really weird kind of scales there, which are also the remnants of the universal veil. Now, let me just see real quick. So the universal veil, this is the universal veil. It's such a weird thing. I didn't know this for the longest time, but the mushroom comes out of a sac. So it comes out almost like a reptile coming out of an egg. So we have this white sac. This sac is the universal veil, and then it pops out. And as it grows, bits and pieces of that sac are what form the spots, what forms in part the veil, and definitely what forms the scales on the bulbous bottom here. So that's why I said earlier that the spots are remnants of the universal veil, is because it's just like it just grow the veil kind of grows into it, and then as the mushroom emerges, it kind of like rips off the pieces. Okay, so other names, not a lot actually. Fly amanita, bug agaric, toadstool is the big one. Gluckspitz, Flagenplitz, macamore, flycap, witch's mushroom, fairy cap. Typically, fly agaric, toadstool, Amanita muscaria. Okay, so this is not her, okay, but I'll talk about this in a second. So, habitat. She is native to conifer and deciduous woodlands. So woodlands that include a lot of pine, oak, spruce, fir, birch, and cedar. Hence why she's allegedly everywhere out in the Pacific Northwest because we have all those. Throughout the temperate and boreal regions of the Northern Hemisphere, so especially in like Alaska, Canada, Siberia, like all of those areas. Um, Also very, very commonly found with boletes. Now, this is a bolete. Bolete are edible. They are massive, big mushrooms. They're very meaty, very hearty. A lot of people who hike will find boletes and just like eat them as like snacks and stuff, especially people who are like backpacking for long treks, like people who are going through the Pacific Crest Trail and stuff. They eat a lot of boletes. Never eat a mushroom unless you are like a professional identifier because there's a lot of lookalikes that are very poisonous, but that's a bolete. So if you are in a place where there's a lot of boletes, you are likely to find our girl, the fly agaric. Um, Now, the season of fruiting is going to vary depending on the climate. So, it can occur in summer and autumn across North America, but later autumn, early winter amongst other places on the Pacific coast. So, there was a recent molecular study that found that it had ancestral origin in the Siberian Beringian region of the Tertiary period. So they found this just means that they found that it traces back to about 66 million years ago, this period begins after the extinction of dinosaurs, and ended just before the like specific ice ages. So basically the mushroom, we have traced it back to starting out right at the extinction of the dinosaurs, which is pretty rad. Okay, so this is variation. This is my girl. This is one that I found. So this is still
Found
called
that?
the Amanita. I did, yes. Yeah, she's not my red top that I'm very excited to find, but I love her very much. I was very happy to find her. So this version is called the Amanita muscaria, the variety of Gusui. Guisui. It is essentially everything is the exact same. Okay, the fruiting time is the same, the worts are the same, everything is the same. The only thing different is instead of a red cap, it is more yellow, kind of creamy color. It can lean a little bit more reddish, but typically it's this very like creamy color. Um, Found most commonly in northeastern North America, so not commonly found in the Pacific Northwest. So I was especially excited for that. Now, some people say that these are the variety Formosa. Other people say that they're a distinct variety. We also have them called the Guisi. We don't know. It's basically throwing people off because everything is the exact same as our red cap. It's just a different color cap. And so there's a lot of discussion being had on like where she fits in the family tree. So I wanted to quickly talk about some lookalikes. So first we have the panther cap. The panther cap looks the exact same. Everything is the exact same. However, she tends to have a like brownish chocolate brown cap, and the warts are like pretty are more uniformly white. So on the Amanita muscaria, the cap or the warts are usually mostly white, but as you get further down, they can get a little bit more creamy. These ones are all pretty much white.
Okay.
Uh, Also, highly poisonous. Most of the amanitas are going to be very poisonous. Okay. Then we have the blusher, also looks very similar, except it bruises very easy. She's very delicate. And the cap is kind of reddish to brown, but the warts are gray. That's the big difference, is the warts are gray. Also very poisonous if eaten raw. Then we have the gemmed amanita. This is toxic. So there's no warts here. Or no, there are warts, but they're very small. You can see like one here. And the size is very tiny, like very small, much smaller than our girl the fly. And then we have the famous death cap, potentially fatal, could kill you. Lots of differences here. There's no warts and the coloring is off too, but for some reason, a lot of people mistake this one for the fly Agaric.
It doesn't look anything like the fly.
It
Okay.
doesn't look anything like her. I
But
know. I
okay.
know. Okay, so let's go into the history and lore. So first we have the name. Why fly Agaric or Agaric? Why? And so there's a couple reasons, but it does stem from flies. So it was believed that the mushroom was a good insecticide, especially for flies. And so, especially in like the Germanic and Slavic parts of Europe, they believe that flies were mostly the cause of um, madness, right? That are, I mean, if I hear a fly buzzing around me and I can't kill it, that would cause me to go a little bit mad too. But it was believed that if the flies like land on you, or if you accidentally like eat them, or if you swallow them when you sleep, that they could cause you to go mad. And so they would take this mushroom, break it up, put it in a bowl of milk, leave the milk out, the fly would land in the milk and it would kill the fly. So that's why it's called the fly agaric, is because it would kill flies.
Huh?
Um, yes, and then we wanted to kill flies because obviously we didn't want the madness to happen.
Go bad. Go bad.
Now, yes, don't want to go mad. Now, the next couple of slides are all going to be at domino, so stick with me.
Okay.
So we have this naturalist, this writer, this observer and writer, Mordecai Cook. He wrote two books. One is called The Seven Sisters of Sleep, printed, or he published this in, or printed it in 1860. And then his second book was A Plain and Easy Account of British Fungi, 2 years later, 1862. Now, this book, The Seven Sisters of Sleep, was a historical account of narcotics. So he would talk about narcotics, obviously stemming from plants because it's 1860. He would talk about narcotics, how you would use them, the effects, how you could overuse them, all kinds of stuff. Now, both books discuss how if you eat the Amanita muscaria, that you can have perceptual distortions. And so things could appear to be larger than they should be, smaller than they should be, closer than they actually are, or large or farther away than they actually are. And so he talked about how this is very, very common when ingesting the toadstool, the red cap. And so this whole thing, this is the first time that this information had been written and like produced. So this section of the book specifically was believed to be the inspiration for Alice in Wonderland, which is where she eats the mushroom. Now, Lewis Carroll never specifically talks about what kind of mushroom it is. And then the original illustrator for the original Alice in Wonderland book was Tenniel, Sir John Tenniel. Now, Sir John Tenniel gave us like the picture of the mushrooms, and in some of the pictures, you can see the spots on some of the mushrooms, but they're not colored or anything. There's no discussion by Carol about the color. So we don't know if it was Amanita muscaria, but because of the distortions, right? So she eats the mushroom, she grows big, she gets small, which ties back to the distorted perception of fly agaric. So we have this printed in 1865, which is just 5 years after he writes this book. So then we have this size distortion, which is also said to be an influence and an inspiration for the Super Mario games, right? Because Mario eats the mushroom and grows bigger. So we have the size distortion again. Now, in the original Super Mario Brothers, it's not the perfect coloring, right? Later ones we see the more typical like red and white, the colors are just flipped, but the distortion, the size distortions vary on par.
That's
So
rad.
yeah, super cool. So then this also is the reason why we have Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Okay, now if you're not familiar with Alice in Wonderland syndrome, it's very, very cool. I think from an outsider's perspective, it sounds terrifying to actually have it, but there's this perceptual distortion called um, dysmetropesia, where also called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, AIWS, also called Todd syndrome. And so you don't even need the psychoactive compounds of the mushroom. This can be like a psychological thing where you're
So let me
actually.
tell you, it was on
Mm.
an episode of a show just this
Oh, really?
season. It was on an episode of Brilliant
Oh,
Minds. And so, yes,
oh, that's
so,
cool.
and I love the guy on Brilliant Minds. So,
Nice.
and
I've never
they
heard of
had
that
a
show.
patient who had this syndrome.
It's so weird. So yeah, when I teach, when I lecture on sensation and perception, my students have to write a paper and they can pick any type of like perceptual
Yeah.
abnormality,
Mhm.
and I give them a list of some things that they can choose, and that this is on the list, and they're always like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Look it up because it sounds so cool." Again, probably terrifying to have, but it sounds really cool. But that's cool. Yeah. So this syndrome or disorder was named after the Alice in Wonderland book came out, and so it was believed to be inspired by her size distortion. So when you have Alice in Wonderland syndrome, it's exactly what it sounds like. You might look at your hand, and your hand might be like 10 times, you see it as 10 times the size, or it could be tiny little like an inch hand, or something could seem very close to you, but it's really like 50 feet away, or it's 50 feet away, but it's almost like looking through a telescope where it feels like it's right in front of you. So lots of distorted things, distorted perceptions.
They give a good description and a visual
Mm.
description in Brilliant Minds of a
Ah,
lady who has this. So just look it up. I know.
interesting. That's cool.
It's rad.
Yeah, so cool. So all of this from our girl Amanita muscaria.
I love that.
Okay, so stepping away from the size distortions, but we still got a lot of history and lore to go
Okay.
through. Now, there's not a lot on this, but there's this archaeologist and folklorist named Gimbutas, who he wrote that in the remote parts of Lithuania, the mushroom was consumed at wedding feasts. So the mushrooms were mixed with vodka, and then people would drink it in celebration. There is not much on this, though. A lot of people actually say that this isn't true or it never happened. Some people said that it is true. So we don't really know, but it has been brought up. And then we have the Sami. So these are the indigenous people of Sapmi, which is like northern Norway, northern Sweden, northern Finland, that whole little like northern area. And the spiritual leader was called a Noidi. Now, the Noidi, if I'm saying that right, it served as a healer, like a diviner, spiritual guide, mediator between the human and the spirit worlds, very much like kind of shaman-esque. Now, there's not a lot of information on this, but it was said that these spiritual people would consume the mushrooms if the mushrooms had 7 spots. So they would only consume it if there was 7 spots, and then they would consume it to do spiritual work. And the spiritual work was to enter an altered state of consciousness. It is a psychoactive, in case you didn't pick up on that. Facilitate as a communication with spirits, go between the veil, those types of things. Now, again, not a ton of information on this. Some people say that it wasn't just the Amanita muscaria, that it could be any mushroom, that some people said that the seven spots thing is not true. So, again, not a lot of info, but I wanted to include it just in case. Okay, so then we have the flying reindeer. So, the flying reindeer of Santa Claus could symbolize the use of Amanita muscaria by these Sami. But so it was believed that we'll talk more about reindeer later, actually, but the white and red Santa Claus is said to come from the Amanita muscaria. And the reindeer is because like the concept of Santa Claus was from these like Finland people in northern Finland, and there's a lot of reindeer up there, things like that. However, the Sami people themselves refute this. They say that it's not true, and it's actually kind of like watering down their own culture. And so it says, the story of Santa emerging from the Sami shamanic tradition has critical number of flaws, says this guy who's like writing this. Um, and a member of the Sami, so this person who's writing this is a member of the Sami descent, and he's also like a scholar in all of these things. And he says the theory has been widely criticized by the Sami people as a stereotype. And so it's problematic, it's romanticizing like their culture. So he says does not come from them, and most of the Sami people agree with that. Okay, now the Parachi speaking group, which is a group in like Afghanistan, essentially like Eastern Afghanistan, they would use this, but it was more medicinal. So they would use an extract to treat psychotic conditions. So if somebody was already psychotic or experiencing psychotic tendencies, they would take this drug. Think of it kind of as like ADHD medication, right? If somebody has ADHD and they're already um, like highly active, go, 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 and ADHD medication is a stimulant. So you would think that giving a stimulant to somebody who's already stimulated would be problematic, but it kind of cancels out. Now, I am not saying that you can replace your antipsychotic medication with Amanita muscaria. Do not do that for the love of all the gods. But
All that is holy. Do not
all that is good and holy and
studying
also evil and
antipsychotics at
everything
this very
else.
moment.
Yes, yes, blues you're not. Blues you're not. However, this group of people had used it. And then they also used it to treat frostbite, which was really interesting. They would apply it externally, and that's pretty much oh, that comma is not shouldn't be there. But we don't know a lot of like reasons why they would apply it, what it did, if it worked, how they would prepare it. But it said that they would apply it to frostbite. Okay, then we have the I always say this wrong. Ojibwe.
Mhm.
Ojibwe? Yeah. So, and I don't know how to say this. But it's like the territories of like the Northwest Canada. So there's this ethnobotanist, very well known, there's his name there, said that her people, which is the Ojibwe people, would use it. Um, but she wrote this book on like medicinal uses of plants and things out in the natural world, but she didn't talk about how they would prepare it, what it was used for, nothing like that. And the person who wrote about this group using it wasn't from that group. He started writing his book saying that he was initiated into the group, and then people disputed that. So take that as you will. Um, Not a lot of information on that though. Okay, this is the cool one. So we're getting into Siberia. Okay, so in Eastern Siberia, a like shaman, they didn't call them shaman, but somebody who was the like a shaman would take the mushroom, right, would eat it, and then would urinate, and people would drink his urine. Now, stick with me on this. Okay, so
Okay.
the the primary psychoactive compound in or compounds, there's two in fly agaric are two things. We have ibotenic acid, which is like the toxic one, right? If you eat it, we'll talk about this in the medicinal part later, but if you eat it, you get very nauseous, lots of puking, lots of diarrhea, lots of really unpleasant stuff. And these unpleasant side effects come from this ibotenic acid. Now, the second big compound is muscimol. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but
Good enough.
this is the psychoactive compound. Okay, this is what gives you like the hallucinogenic effects and the psychoactive effects. Now, after somebody consumes the mushroom, the psychoactive compound is like you pass it through your urine. However, the acid, the ibotenic acid, gets filtered out. So the shaman would kind of make almost like a sacrifice of himself to take on this very terrible side effects, would also get the psychoactive effects, but would feel terrible. He pees it out. People drink the urine, has the same level, very similar level of the
That's rad.
psychoactive compounds. Yeah, but none of the negative effects. Okay, again,
I
not
love
telling you
that.
to drink people's urine. Okay, but this is what
Maybe.
they did. And it would be like a chain. So then people lower kind of like on the hierarchy or people who hadn't experienced it before would then drink that second person's urine and it would get a little bit diluted through the
Yeah.
chain. Okay, they call this like chain recycling, I think. So pretty rad actually.
Amazing.
Um yeah. And so then, so why did they do this, right? They didn't just do this for fun. Hey, let's like see some cool colors and like do this. This is a very spiritual practice, which is why they would only consume it after the shaman had consumed it. So why did they do this? For communication with the spirits. They would use it to heal the sick. So the shaman or like the healer would use it, and then it was believed that he would get information from the spirits or the universe on how to heal sick people. Divination, soul journeys, which are like traveling to spirit worlds, finding lost objects, even receiving messages from ancestors, things like that. Now, the urine drinking practice has also been documented among a lot of other indigenous groups, and I give you some here, but it seemed to start based on like reports and oral stories and things. It seems to have started in Siberia, which makes sense because the mushroom is wild there.
I love that story.
Super cool. I
Very
know.
cool.
Yeah. So, a couple more things with this. I want to tell you a quick story. So, there's a story about the fly agaric, which was called the wapak. The wapak was the mushroom, right? So, in this story, there is this deity called Vahiyinen, and he was the god, right? And so he like creates earth and then he spits onto earth and his spit becomes the mushroom and the warts on top of it are just like the little saliva droplets, so like the big spit ball, shall we say, became the mushroom, but then the little like spittle droplets became the caps on top of the mushroom. Now, there's a raven, and so the raven is hungry, sees the mushroom, consumes the mushroom, and he loves this. He feels enlivened. He feels like this is the most beautiful plant ever to exist. And he was so exhilarated with the mushroom that he told the mushroom to grow forever on this earth so that his children, the people, could learn from it. And so the fly agaric was in Siberia, again, only used as like a learning connection spiritual tool. Now, continuing on from like the reindeer urine, it was also reported that reindeer would follow an individual. So, like, they would see somebody eating the mushroom or could smell it or something, maybe, and then they would follow this person. The person would urinate, and then the deer would eat the plants or the grasses that the person had urinated on, and then would be able to consume it that way. There's actual reports of this, of reindeer following people around who had consumed the mushroom and then eating the plants that that person had just urinated on, which is pretty cool. Um, and then the people would find these reindeer who were kind of like, they call it drunken, but who clearly were having these psychedelic
Intoxicated.
experiences. And then they would like rope them in or like hunt them. Okay, so then we have Vikings. So there were some people who said that the Vikings used the mushroom to produce their berserker rages. Now, if you're not familiar with this, the berserker rage is a trance-like state of frenzied animalistic fury. So a lot of the Vikings, before going into battle, would go into this berserker rage so that they could just like plow through people. So it was said that the going to get into this berserker rage, they would consume the mushroom. However, we don't really know. There's not really sources that mention this, and it doesn't really make sense because the psychoactive component is a relaxant. Now, people can experience it differently, just like with anything, but generally speaking, it doesn't like energize, especially like high level energy like rage. So we don't really know, but other researchers say that it's probably black henbane that the berserker rage, to get into the berserker range, it was probably black henbane they would consume. Okay, so then we have another interesting one. So first, let's talk about soma really quick. Also, if you're like getting tired of this, we're like halfway through, but I love
Oh,
this. I'm
I'm
so into it.
not.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the soma. So, in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest sacred text in Hinduism, it's one of the oldest known texts of Indo-European like descent. So this text was written in ancient Sanskrit sometime between like 1700 and 1100 BCE. So very old. It consists of a lot of different stuff, over 1,000 hymns, over 10,000 verses, praising various deities. It seems kind of like Bible-esque, okay?
Oh,
Obviously before the Bible, but seems kind of along those lines. Now, in this text, there is this thing called the soma, and the soma is discussed in three different ways. One is discussed as a ritual drink, it's also discussed as a deity, and it's also discussed as this life-giving essence. So it's kind of like used interchangeably in these for these three different things. Now, what is the soma? We don't really know for sure, but for the drink at least. It said in the text that priests would gather the soma plant, press or pound it, filter the juice of that plant, mix it with some liquid, water, milk, ghee, which is like clarified butter if you're not familiar. And they would offer it to the gods while drinking it themselves, like an offering, right? Drink it themselves, offer it to the god. And the drink was considered one of the most sacred offerings in the Vedic religion. So, what was the plant? Now, in 1968, this like author says that it might have been the mushroom. And so there's some reasons for this. Descriptions of the soma didn't really talk about roots, seeds, or stems. So we think maybe it wasn't discussed because it didn't have those things. Use the adjective hari, which means like dazzling or flaming, which he interpreted as the redness of the cap. And then one line described men urinating the soma, which is like the recycling of the urine in
wow.
Siberia that we had been seeing. Yeah. And so also the soma is mentioned as coming from the mountains, which we see, as I said,
Adds
Alaska
up.
and like the
Yeah.
northern part. Yeah. And what else? Oh, so all of these things together, he says, I feel relatively confident that it was the flag, Eric. Then we have this other person who is a Vedic scholar from Cambridge, and he said, I don't think that's true. There's not enough information to really say that it's any mushroom, let alone the specific type of mushroom. Then we have this other anthropologist coming in saying, yeah, like I could see that there's not enough information, but I think there's enough to like cautiously side in favor of the mushroom. So there's this really big back and forth. People who don't align with the concept of being the mushroom think that it was a ephedra. So, we don't
Yeah.
know.
Interesting.
Yeah. So then we have Christianity because Christianity always pops its head in, something pretty
All right.
quick.
What is
I,
that?
no, always. Now, you and I talked about this years ago where I came across this and I sent it to you and I was like, look at this. And we had like a small little brief discussion on it.
Uh-huh.
But There was this like archaeologist, Dead Sea Scroll scholar, who came up with this theory that early Christian theology was derived from a fertility cult, and that this fertility cult kind of like revolved around Amanita muscaria. And he wrote this book in 1970 called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, and I have that PDF. I still haven't read it yet. I kind of like skimmed through it when I first found it, and just based on my skimming, I don't know if I agree with it, but it's an interesting theory. It's pretty cool, actually. The PDF is free online if you look hard enough, but it seems pretty rad. There's not a lot of people who support this theory, but it's
I,
pretty cool idea. Yeah, that maybe the kind of concept of Christianity kind of came from this fertility cult, which was centered around the mushroom.
that's amazing.
Then we also have Disney's Fantasia with the mushroom dance. I
Don't
love.
take me over there
Oh yeah, that's right. You do have one.
from
The
Fantasia.
Fantasia is like my favorite Disney movie. Fantasia and The Little Mermaid are my two favorite Disney movies ever, like of all time. Especially the original 1940 version. I don't think I've seen the newer Fantasia. We don't know. Is it Amanita? Who knows? There's no warts, but it's a red cap, so. So then we have a lot of Amanita muscaria is found in Victorian fairy art. So a lot of art, but I focused on art that was published before 1901. So I just want to show you like five of them real quick. We
Okay,
have Richard Doyle, who did a lot of fairy and included a lot of amanitas.
I love
I
that.
love this is so cute, I know. And then we have another Richard Doyle. Again, no warts, but the cap looks pretty red. We have the John Fitzgerald, who also did a lot of Amanitas. Another John Fitzgerald. This looks kind of similar to the first one, but also a little different. I like the coloring, like the very muted
I
colors.
know.
And then we have this one, who's Ivan Bilbin, which is Baba Yaga and
Oof,
lots of
I love
mushrooms
that.
associated with this. I love this too. It looks like a newer painting, but he painted this in 1900,
That's
which
amazing.
is super cool. Yeah. So, anyways, lots of mushrooms and like paintings and stuff. We also have the Smurf
Oh.
house. Not exact coloring, but pretty dang close if you ask me.
Uh-huh. That's right.
And then we have fairy rings. So, a fairy ring, let's talk about fairy rings really quick. Amanita muscaria are not often found in fairy rings, but let's talk about fairy rings really quick. So, fairy ring is a naturally occurring ring or arc, sometimes of mushrooms. Now, with mushrooms, typically you have like a center point, and then the mushrooms, as they kind of like spread, will grow out, and then the center will die off. And so you'll see that the ring will keep getting bigger and bigger as long as there's food, but the you don't see any mushrooms in the center because they die off. And so the outer ring is just the newest growth of the mushrooms. That's how fairy rings are formed. Now, Amanita muscaria is mycorrhizal, which means it does not grow that way, which is very rare for a mushroom. There's a few mushrooms that are not grown that way. Amanita is one of them. They have a partnership with tree roots. So they do not feed on dead organic matter like most other mushrooms. Most mushrooms are found feeding on dead organic matter, dead tree roots, dead grass, things like that. But Amanita does not. And so what happens is Amanita finds a friend. They find a little tree friend, and they wrap around the roots of the tree, and it becomes a true partnership where I wrote this down. The tree provides where is that? The tree provides sugars from photosynthesis, so it provides sugar to the mushrooms, which acts as a food source. And in return, the mushroom provides water, nitrogen, and phosphorus to the tree. So it is a true partnership. This is why you usually will see them very close to trees, whereas other mushrooms could be anywhere, but they grow very close to trees because they need the tree roots. So, not usually found in fairy circles, not impossible as long as there's trees around it, but pretty rare. I do quickly, though, just want to talk about fairy rings in general, just because they could form a fairy ring. So, some brief things. In England, fairy rings were believed to be places where the fairies danced at night, elves gathered, moonlit celebrations occurred, and it was believed that you should never ever step inside a fairy ring because if you do, you will dance until you are exhausted and then disappear forever, being transported to fairyland. Um, in Ireland, fairy rings were considered entrances to the other world, sacred places belonging to the AOC, which is the fairy people, and damaging one was thought to bring illness, bad luck, and crop failure. In fact, in Ireland, I love how Ireland is so like rooted in its folklore. They will build roads around a fairy ring. Like if they're
That's
trying to build a
amazing.
road and there's a fairy ring, they will build around it. I love Ireland so much.
That's rad.
Um, in Germany, fairy rings were called Hexenringe, which means witches' rings, and so not associated with fairies, but associated with witches. It was believed that this is where witches gathered for sabbats, magical ceremonies, and midnight dances. France, their rings were sometimes called ronds de sorcières, which is witches' circles, associated with witches dancing. And then in Scandinavia, we have elves. So it was believed that elves danced in the circles and the mushrooms marked their footprints. And then flying ointments, do we use them in flying ointments? I'm sure we'll get into flying ointments at some point in this discussion, but usually not. Flying ointments do not usually include fly agaric because it doesn't seem to be absorbed through the skin. So,
Yep.
not going to get into flying ointments right now, but you apply it topically, and so. Okay, so moving on. We have the dark medicinal. Okay, so wide range of psychoactive effects, depressant, sedative or hypnotic, psychedelic, dissociative, or dereliant. We also see some paradoxical effects, which are things like stimulation. Paradoxical effect means just like happening in the opposite way,
Yeah.
right? So it's usually like a depressant, it's like bringing you down, but it could kind of amp you up a little bit, but not often. We also have perceptual phenomena like synesthesia. Love synesthesia. If you're not familiar, very, very quickly. I had to give an hour talk on synesthesia in grad school, but essentially it's where you have a sensation and a perception and some other perception that doesn't naturally occur. So things like tasting colors. So it's like a blending of sensory experiences. So this is very common with the consumption. Um, Micropasia, which is a type of Alice in Wonderland syndrome where things specifically appear larger, micro meaning big, right? Or macro meaning big. Micropasia, things seeming smaller, micro meaning small. Um, Other
Pamela
different things.
Coleman Smith. Pamela Coleman Smith had synesthesia, and she painted
Interesting.
the Rider-Waite tarot. So,
Mm. There's some really interesting people who are said to have synesthesia. Marilyn Monroe was said to have had synesthesia, and Stevie Wonder said
oh,
that he could see colors when he heard certain sounds, which is how it helped him compose like his music.
that's
Super cool.
wild.
Yeah, synesthesia is, I tell my students too, I'm like, once again, could be distracting and like annoying if you have it, but from the outsider's perspective, seems so cool. Like
I
so
know a
rad.
person who has synesthesia. Who
So
like
it's
colors are
pretty.
associated with like letters and like you
Mm-hmm.
name like could like
Yeah.
conjures like colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like super rare. I think the most up-to-date estimate is like 1 in 200 people. So it's not super rare, but it's pretty cool. Pretty cool, man. So I should have started this by saying this might sound cool, okay, but you can be poisoned. Okay, this is why we're just talking about it in the poisons group. Um, do not consume this. Okay, I would suggest don't consume it. I don't ever want to consume it. I would never risk that. You should not either. So it sounds cool, but
No.
we're not doctors. Okay, just let's use our brain a little bit here.
Yeah.
So, ingestion of the mushroom can cause poisoning, especially in children, and especially people who seek it out for hallucinogenic effects. They tend to come into the hospital with poisoning. Um, and fatal poisonings are very rare, okay? It's very, very rare to actually die from this. However, it sounds terrible, okay? Nonstop explosive diarrhea, explosive
Horrible.
projectile vomiting. Okay, incredible stomach cramps, terrible stuff. Okay, it sounds terrible. Now, parboiling reduces the toxicity, and so you could still have the psychoactive effects if you parboil it. However, again, you're still risking, like, are you boiling it enough? If you boil it too much, you can like very much diminish the psychoactive effects. It's like you have to find this perfect balance, otherwise you're just kind of screwing yourself over. So I would just not. Okay. Now it contains, oh yes, I talked about these two. The ibotenic acid, this is the gnarly one. Okay. It is a neurotoxin. Okay. It is why you should not risk it for the biscuit. Okay. It is
Do not risk it
terrible.
for the biscuit.
Do not risk it for the biscuit.
Do-
Um, um, and an active dose of this acid is found in one cap. So one cap of this mushroom has enough dosage of this acid to cause all of these crazy gnarly effects. So it's not like, oh, I'll just take a little bit. Okay, you don't even need very much. And you can't measure it properly because
No.
the amount of this acid is going to vary depending on the region, the season, all kinds of stuff. And in summer, the summer mushrooms have been reported to contain up to 10 times more ibotenic acid. Don't risk it. Sounds cool. It's cool to study, but don't risk it. Also, just really quickly, and there's a lot of text here, but I just quickly wanted to talk about it, how it's unpredictable. Some people who do take it for hallucinogenic effects, they don't even get any hallucinogenic effects, okay? It's incredibly unpredictable because the amount of these properties varies so much. You can also have, oh yeah, twitching, drowsiness, low blood pressure, sweating, salivation, ataxia, which where you can't control your muscle movements, loss of equilibrium, all kinds of stuff. Also, the poisoning looks very similar to datura poisoning, which if you know anything about datura poisoning, terrible. It sounds terrible. So this is just more stuff, okay? More stuff on like how long it
10,000
lasts and stuff.
spiders is Datura. Like, that's why I will never
Yeah.
have Jimson weed. 10,000
No.
spiders. No way.
No, that sounds terrible. I
God.
am not there. Look, if you are looking for that type of thing, there are so many other ways to go about it. Why
Mhm.
risk it? Like, why risk it? Yeah, 10,000 spot. No, no, thank you. No, no, thank you. And also, even after all of that, right? So you've gone through the whole gnarly stuff, everything, you're like, you've gone through it. You can still have a massive headache for up to 10
Oh
hours.
my God.
Sounds terrible, terrible.
Horrible.
You think you're out and then like
No,
headache for 10
you are
hours.
not.
Okay. Anyways, transitioning. So, yes. Element Earth because of the underground like mycelial network. I'll give it, that's fine.
Okay.
Sign associated with Pisces because of like the mystic, illusion, like, mysticism kind of like opening.
Sure.
I could see that. Planet is Mercury, mostly because of like the boundary crossing, right? Going into the spiritual realm, talking to the ancestors, that kind of stuff. Tarot is the moon, kind of similar, right? Associated with the unconsciousness. Any psychedelics, I would think, in part could be attributed to like the moon card because it's like going into your unconscious, illumination, tapping into other things, other worlds, kind of like the moon. And then for that same reason, the third eye chakra, visionary, intuition, seeing the unseen, things like that. I
Rad.
could see them. Yeah. Okay, so then my last slide. I don't have a lot of magical stuff. I would not consume them again. So how can you use it other than consumption? Couple ways, right? You could, if you want to handle it, the dried mushroom or a photograph, botanical illustration, carving, sculpture, anything that you want like that, like
Soul
on
collage.
soul collage, yes, absolutely. Anything like that you could put on like your space, your mystical space as like a representation, right? A representation of this of tying into these things that we just talked about, tying into those like realms, especially if you like working with the Fae and things like that. Um, Meditation, you could meditate on the symbolism, forest visualization, including the mushrooms, connecting with nature, things like that. You could like go out into nature if you found one, sit with it, meditate with it, talk to it. Journal work, so you could use it as like some type of shadow work prompt or dream recalling, transformation rituals, any type of like journal work prompt associated with those things. You could also have like give it an offering, right? Leave offerings near the mushroom, obviously without disturbing them if you can. Um, when I find mushrooms, I don't harvest them. I don't like to eat mushrooms. And even if I did, though, I probably wouldn't harvest them much. I think that they're beautiful. And to me, it's almost like it's the same as like cutting down a tree. People think like it's one mushroom, and it's like, okay, but cutting down a tree is one tree in a forest, but it still makes me sad. Like, I don't want to cut it down. So if you didn't really want to like disturb it, you could always like leave it an offering and connect with it in that way. And then obviously some type of like art, right? Painting, things like that. And then topics or areas associated with it. Everything we've talked about, we just spent who knows how long talking about how it's used. So spirit communication, liminal spaces, nature, dreams, transformation, vision, quests, things like that.
I love it.
And that's it.
I
That was
love
a
it.
long one, but
That
it
is
was,
amazing.
it's
It
good.
was amazing.
Okay, good. Let's see. Where are we at? Oh yeah, stop sharing. Okay.
I love it. I hope you guys loved it. It was amazing. I
Good.
am so excited about this topic, by the way. It is amazing.
Yeah, so
So
good.
definitely, I know, hop on board the poison train, the psychoactive train, because we are riding it down the
Yes, we are.
track. So,
Uh,
like and subscribe below, and we will see you at the next Ditch Witch Diaries.